Hi, I'm Allan McKay. Welcome to my channel. I help artists in visual effects, games, and design level up their skills and their career while getting paid what they're worth, treating their career as a real business. I want to help artists get the success that they deserve and land their dream job. And in this video, if you've ever wanted to know about the Unreal Fellowship over at Epic Games, I wanted to share with you what it is, what's inside, and how to get in. So recently I sat down with Poole, who's the technical program manager for Epic Games, and we do a massive deep dive into virtual production, as well as where it's all headed, as well as Unreal Engine, metahumans, what's the ideal hardware for working in game development and film, specifically around real time, and so much more. So I wanted to do a deep dive on everything related to real time and Unreal, and Brian is the perfect person to break this all down. If you like this video, one thing I wanted to share with you is a free course I've just put together, which is on how to raise your prices as an artist, how to attract your dream clients, and how to get paid what you're worth. So this is 8 hours of free training I've put together. If you want to check it out, I've left a link in the description below, or you can go to pricingclass.com. And this is all entirely free. I want to help artists earn the rates they deserve and eliminate the starving artist mindset once and for all. So check it out. We go into so much around how to earn money. I know it's such a taboo subject, and that's why I wanted to lift the kimono and talk deep about the subject, both as an artist as well as a manager, someone who pays artists and hires them for a living. So this is something that I can talk about it from both angles. Okay, so check it out, pricingclass.com, or check the link below and get all 8 hours of free training. My goal is to get this in the hands of as many people as possible so we can all rise up together. Finally, if you have any questions or anything specifically related to this video, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you, as well as any other suggested topics loosely around this that you'd like to see too. I'll definitely check it out. I'm happy to reply to every single comment I see. Thanks again, and let's dive into this lesson. Again, Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Poole. I'm a training program manager at Epic Games. I'm currently the academic dean for the fellowship, which is a new program that we've deployed at Epic for training artists who've been furloughed from the whole COVID-19 thing. And I also, I was a technical account manager over with Epic as well before moving over into the training department. So that was basically kind of like acting as a client advocate as they, tried to basically integrate Unreal into their workflows and such. So we would spend time with clients. It was a couple of us who were technical account managers, and it was a good gig. Gave me lots of opportunities to, integrate, learn the technology, and meet with a lot of clients, which was fun. But my whole background is in film production. I've worked as a previz supervisor for about 17, 18 years. I had my own previz company for a while, Persistence of Vision, with David Dezoritz. It was David actually who gave me my first gig up at Skywalker Ranch, for episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So, and there's a number of other visual effects houses I've worked for: Industrial Light and Magic, Sony ImageWorks, Digital Domain, Method Studios, a few others.
Cool. I love that. And your background is more layout, previz, at least those are kind of more your roots. So I'm just kind of curious, like knowing, like I love that for a start, because I feel like that's one of those careful roles that you actually have more creative control and also get to interface more with the director, usually.
Definitely.
Opposed to, let's say visual effects and post-production. What's your experience been like that? And I'm kind of curious, like how it ties into real time. Like, I guess working with like Mark over on Independence Day and with those guys at Method, like that would have been a good indication for real time and previz. But like before that, was the writing on the wall for you that this is an area that would eventually migrate to real time?
Well, previz is very much, being on the bleeding edge kind of thing. Back in the day, when, working on Attack of the Clones, it was still off the shelf software that we were, using, Macintoshes, PCs, and so forth. We tried, of course, very hard as best we could to make things as close to real time as possible, but there ain't much you can accomplish, in OpenGL and Maya. It was It was pretty much gray boxes and, gray shaded, characters that didn't really have any kind of articulation. And it was just simple sliding around, for positioning things. We did eventually get to the point, of course, where you could start to, do a little bit of animation in basics. The first Star Wars prequel, Phantom Menace, they did all of their pre-visualization with electric image. Talk about ages gone by. But for Attack of the Clones, we did the previs in Maya, and it was like, I don't remember exactly, Maya 2.5 or something like that. And so, we could put in a little bit of articulation in the characters, and we could get them to animate and, do some really, interesting things. And again, the best we could do with OpenGL as far as quality, you had basically, I think, a total or maximum of 16 lights that you could put in there. And there are a lot of limitations, but, ultimately, everybody in previs would always strive for, as fast as, you could go, because you had to interface and interact with the director. Directors can get impatient, when they have to wait. And, the whole thought behind it was, let's do what we can to give as fast a turnaround as we can. And the best we could do was play blasting out of Maya, which wasn't horrible. You'd play blast, you'd put it into editorial, and, that was okay.
I was going to jump in and say that back then, I'm sure you would have had to make sure you disable your screensaver.
Oh, sure.
Otherwise, you come back and there's a giant star field strobing over your play blast because the screen changed.
They finally fixed that, though, after a little while in Maya. In the very early days when you would play blast out of Maya, yes, you could accidentally capture your screen. Yeah. They fixed it eventually, but yeah, as far as like being on that cutting edge, yes, we always looked for technologies to try and help speed things up and to try and get as close to real time as we could, and still increase quality levels. So, there were some early technologies that attempted to do that. When I owned my previous company, we tried to use a technology called Mock Studio Pro. I don't know if you remember that one. It was actually a real-time game engine-like type of solution that used GPUs for rendering, much better quality stuff. We used it for some previs on a couple of films, but I also remember in early days trying to use CryEngine, and Cinebox for doing previs with game engines. Lovely looked fantastic. A complete pain to get things into, though. It was much more complicated. You had to obey all kinds of different rules, for getting your models into the engine. No overlapping vertices. You could only use, powers of two textures. You had to limit your polygonal count on per object basis to 65,000 polygons or less. You had to just follow all these specific rules, and it just made it a hassle to use. Yeah. So everybody just kind of said, okay, as soon as it gets better, we'll consider game engines more and more. And you're right. We did attempt to use Cinebox and CryEngine on Independence Day Resurgence, when I was working for Method. And we got one sequence out that looked pretty decent, but it was still too clunky to really make it work at a speed, that the director would be happy with. We could actually work faster in Maya play blasting and getting things to editorial than to, arm wrestle with Cinebox to, make everything perfect and to get all the shaders correct, and all that kind of thing was still cumbersome. So
that's cool. And I guess just as quickly as we can dive into virtual production, because I'm very eager about that, but
of course,
you going on to work with Epic, how did that come about? And was it something that, kind of based on your trajectory, it sounds like kind of like going to the source of, okay, let's go to where the engines are working well instead of the kind of software solutions. It's like go to where people are doing it right and elevate that.
Well, I kind of had it in to come to work for Epic, and that was Mark Petit. He was the one who contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested to come work for the company. And that was based off of a relationship, some prior work experience at Autodesk. I went to work for Autodesk for 3 years, and it was there that I met Mark, and worked there for a while. There was a couple of projects that we were trying to do. It's all stuff that it didn't actually hit the shelves, but it was a big initiative to do some cloud-based asset management software and a few other things. And I stayed there for about 3 years, and then afterwards went back to work in visual effects. I think it was at that time after Autodesk, I was back at Method for a while, and a couple of other previz houses that I was doing some work with them. And then Mark called me. I was actually working for Proof previz at the time, and Mark inquired, "What's your availability?" And we opened up a dialogue, and next thing I got the gig, and I started working for Epic, contracted first, and then they brought me on full time.
I love that. And obviously virtual productions become like the big buzzword that everyone's going crazy for. But at the same time, like, I think it's such an exciting time where there's a lot of innovation right now. And that's one that I think is definitely shaping a lot of how we do things. I'm curious, just how would you explain what virtual production is, just for everyone who's struggling to phrase it right? It's an LED wall, it's this, it's real time, it's...
Yeah. Well, virtual production, I consider it a spectrum of technologies. It's not just one thing, but if you were to try to put it to one thing, you could say it is where the practical meets the virtual. So, you have the ability to work with practical equipment that influences things in a virtual world. So, that could be, tracking your camera with some sort of optical tracking system, or, through using in a more simple level, using like a Vive base stations to track the position of an object and relate that information into something like a game engine that will drive a virtual camera. But virtual production is the ability to merge technologies. It's to merge both practically shot, or excuse me, the ability to merge practical tech with virtual tech, I guess would be the best way. So I'm kind of stumbling over my words at the moment, but
that makes sense. Well, I guess just circling around that, like, when did it become a thing? Like, it's funny, I was talking with a few of the guys who are more involved in creating a lot of the LED technology not that long ago, and for them, they're like, this virtual production word kind of like popped up somewhere, but we've been doing this stuff for a long time. But as you said, it's bridging it all together. But I'm kind of curious for you, like, when did it become like a thing? Let's say, obviously Mandalorian was a big catalyst for it, but with Epic kind of embracing it as well, like, how did it all tie together? It's like, let's double down on this and kind of prep the world for this new way of working or new workflow.
Right. Well, yeah, if you do ask anybody out there, there has been an entire history of virtual production technology, so to speak, where there's been attempts to, merge rear projection with, shooting practically with a person in front of a screen. And, it was, there was various attempts to accomplish this. And it wasn't until, relatively recently that, we started getting display technologies that would be capable of, having a high enough pixel density to make it, practical for use. And, Mandalorian was, for me, kind of the first experience of seeing this kind of technology put into practice, in a modern sense. I can still remember going to see the Mandalorian set, for the first time, and nobody told me exactly what it was to begin with. They're like, "Oh, we're going to show you this new tech." And I was walking to the soundstage, and the soundstage door was open, and I could see Mos Eisley in the distance, and it's like, I was like, dang, that's a huge set. And then when I walked through the doors, I kind of was like, oh, wow, this isn't a set at all. Well, there were practical pieces, of course, in the midground, foreground of the set, but all of the background was being, rendered in Unreal and being displayed on LED panels. And it was a completely a shocker for me to see. So, so for me, there was a lot of preliminary setup to all of this. Getting obviously Unreal Engine to be, operating in a photorealistic capacity, so that you could effectively place Unreal renderings in a background, shoot it with a camera with a person in the foreground, and not see any kind of moire pattern. I mean, under certain circumstances you can, but it basically gave a much more seamless look and appearance. So, I mean, as far as like how far back to go, and when did Epic start coming up with this? Well, that would probably be a great question for Kim Labiri, our CTO. I'm sure that he was probably working on all of this with our special projects team, way in advance. I came on at around 2017, is when I started working for Epic. And, I had started hearing rumors about it a little bit because, it was very still secretive within our own company. And, Unreal was just starting to integrate sequencer into its tool set, so you can't really do the things that something like The Mandalorian requires without tools like sequencer and improvements in rendering tech. So it was probably well underway around 2017, 2018, and like I said, it was very hush and secret within the company, and then word started getting out amongst us and the employees about what this all was, and then we eventually got a chance to see it, and it just blew me away.
Yeah, I love it because it's such a game changer, and like I want to chat about COVID in a minute, but again, like I think that in a lot of ways it's opened up a lot of doors right now with how everyone's had to pivot as well. I'm curious, and I realize it's a bit of an open-ended question, but like what have been some of the biggest challenges with tackling like a virtual production workflow, whether it is like, let's say, waiting for cards to start having real-time ray tracing, or whether it is getting the workflow just to be able to operate with all the different assets and tools and how everyone else works in film. Like for you, what have been the big challenges?
Well, the biggest challenge of all right now is talent, personnel. There's obviously, this is a lot of new technology and a lot of people who aren't used to working in a game engine, first and foremost, especially those who are in visual effects and animation fields, traditional backgrounds. So, I know, like for myself, when I started learning Unreal Engine, it was a paradigm shift in thinking. I was not used to the whole concept of having nearly an entire pipeline in a box, and I was so used to a very linear production method and workflow, very departmentalized, very specific, publish that, an assets or some type of product, and then the next department takes it and builds off of that and so forth. So when I got in to start using, Unreal, it was really tough for me to understand concepts around, using levels and sub-levels and sub-scenes and all these different types of way that Unreal was saving data, and it was just confusing for me. Now it makes sense, and I don't even question as to why would you not work like this. It makes so much sense, especially when you're working with a team. So talent, huge, thing to overcome. And at Epic, we're working on this, of course, and that's where the whole fellowship comes into things, because we're trying to train more and more of a workforce to use Unreal. So, the next thing is just next big challenge with virtual production, I would say, is you kind of have to sustain a dual pipeline. You still have your traditional digital content creation tools, DCCs like Maya and so forth. So you've got to have a strong skill set in all of that. And then, Unreal, at least in the early days of, when Mandalorian was first starting, there's been a lot of evolution in the program from then to now. And the things that we take for granted now were a bit of a challenge to complete, especially in a production setting. So you've got visual effects supervisors and directors breathing down your neck, to produce something on unproven technology, or at least this is the first time it's being deployed. And so you've got all the pressures of normal production, and then you have all the pressures of having this new way of doing things and having people who are not familiar with that workflow. So you have to rely on specialists. You have to, bring in experts who, are strong in game engine tech. And, quite frankly, a lot of game engine personnel don't understand film production pipelines. They're like, why, do you want this to take so long to render? Why do you have to have all of your quality levels up so high? It's just gamers and game production artists are just sometimes like, this makes no sense to us either. So there's this whole conversation that visual effects folks and game engine folks have to have. And, that was a slow process for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's always been such a disconnect between games and film, where in one way I can really respect games because you're having to come up with essentially what people make in film, but work within the limitations of the engine. And so it's always about efficiency. I think there's pros and cons to both.
Sure. Yep. And, early days of Unreal, in starting to be used in a film production pipeline, the whole ingestion process was certainly better than most game engines that I have encountered. But it was still pretty rudimentary, back in 2016, 2015, getting data into the engine. You could import an FBX and that kind of thing was still pretty solid, but it was still, there were some things to consider, and there were no easy ways to bring in and ingest model data and preserve the look and feel. The shader, systems were different. So you'd wind up importing something into Unreal and everything would be gray, and so it's like, oh, great. Now I have to start the whole process of rebuilding all my shaders and apply them to the models. And it was just laborious. So, that's where, Epic went into overdrive to make that process easier and, find more efficient ways to make that process simpler.
Love that. One big question I've had for a while, just in terms of like the whole kind of spectrum of how this all fits together, is where artists fit in. Like I kind of suspect that there's new job roles being created right now because you don't have previz necessarily, because you are doing previz, but you're also doing assets way before that. But I'm assuming that they need to also be at production level, and they need to then probably be shared out to visual effects facilities later on for final production as well. So I'm imagining that before you would have previz, then you had postviz as being kind of the bridge to eventually go into visual effects. But this, in a lot of ways, I imagine you're doing final production level quality work in conceptual and pre-production stages before they even ever land in frame. How does that all work in terms of the workflow? And do you see there being dedicated positions specifically for virtual production in the future?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, first off, you're absolutely right. In a traditional pipeline, using classic previz, you can almost guarantee that no matter what you made in previz, it would never be taken over into the final product. It was just the quality levels and the speed in which things had to be built in order to make it work with previz were just not high enough. So what would be considered good for a previz artist and good for a previz sequence might be objects or assets, 60,000 polygons up to 85,000 polygons for a single object. And you didn't really want to load down your characters to be too heavy inside of Maya, because then you'd have really slow interaction when trying to animate things, and you wind up getting more than 3 to 5 enveloped characters inside of Maya, and you could pretty much expect 5 frames per second, really slow, dodgy performance. And so you would have to go and do all of your animation, play blast it, take a look at it, play it back in real time, through a QuickTime file or something like that, make your changes, play blast it again, send it back into editorial. So there's this big feedback loop that, you had to use in order to just look at your stuff in context and to see how well it looked. Now, with previz, we would do a lot of step and keyframe and, step keyframing where, you'd have a position and you'd slide them around or do whatever. And if you had time and if the director wanted it, you might put in, some articulation, some, animated movements, and, oh, I can turn the head here or there. And that was all fine. But most of the time, the previz coming out of that whole process was used for reference only, particular visual reference. We would create sequences in editorial, feeding them shots like a traditional, like a traditional film production would do. Here's your footage. The footage is, previz shots, and the editor would edit it together like he would normally. And they would produce, an entire sequence based off of this. And after the director would give feedback, you do your revision process over and over and over. Ultimately, it was that completed sequence that would be handed off to, say, the visual effects producer, who would send that out, after the visual effects supervisor kind of gave its final blessing. They would send it out for bidding to the different visual effects houses, whether it was the ILMs, the Sonys, the Digital Domains, or the Method Studios. They would receive these previz sequences and use them as reference to construct something better. And even though in previz we would send them our cameras and our layouts and all that kind of stuff, it was usually like, thank you, over we go. So, but still, it was a very informative process. It definitely gave the director the ability to visualize what his film looked like. Very informative, and we could still do a lot of technical previz as well, when we were given adequate amounts of time, so that we could go on to set and potentially make the proper decisions so that the director wouldn't, and the visual effects supervisor wouldn't make inappropriate choices when spending lots of money. So in comes game engines, and game engines game engines are an interesting development, because now you get the means to remove a lot of limiters that you had using a traditional DCC. You could throw millions of polygons into a game engine and it wouldn't choke. You could achieve a lot of great looking visual imaging and clarity, and playback could be in real time or near real time, and you could iterate on the fly, which made the decision-making process a little faster. It was a blessing and a curse, in a lot of cases. And we even saw this in traditional previs. The better you make things look for a director, the more they want to pick at it and, change this and change that. But now, directors are becoming more savvy and they know the technology better. And so they're starting to see, okay, I know that this can be changed, or I can make these, manipulations down to the last minute if I have to, but I can dial it in earlier, even more so. And so when game engines kind of came onto the scene and previs started moving towards using game engines as a technology, we kind of saw a whole shifting of the production workflow, where things that you normally did in post, you could actually now start doing in production. And things that you were starting to do in production, you could better plan in pre-production. And so work actually started to begin in pre-production, which is very stressful for us in previs, but it was what it was. And but what's nice is that in the end, the post-production process could actually be used what it was intended for, which was to sweeten and make the image look beautiful, rather than trying to develop story in post, which is a huge overhead and a massive waste of resources, and could definitely get you in a lot of trouble. So so there was a lot of like, okay, can we potentially create assets in pre-production that could carry through the entire pipeline? And the answer was yes, you could, because you could start building things at a quality level and a resolution level that could be considered final today. So the game engine wouldn't bat an eye if you fed it a character or an environment that had millions of polygons in it. So the only specific limitation, probably at least in the early days of game engines, was the animation rigs and the way to interface and getting animation into the engine was a little more complex, in that it was in some ways too simple. You had to actually have characters with a less sophisticated animation rig. It would be great for motion capture and that'd be fine, but animators weren't happy because there was a lot of stuff that they couldn't do in a game engine. But that all started to change, of course, and there was better ways to get more sophisticated rigs. There was technologies that came out like Alembic caching, that you could just bring over whole animated geometry caches into engines, and it was a lot of ways to start improving all of that. But and now, insert plug here, MetaHumans, which just came out a couple days ago, now we can effectively rig in a much more complex manner inside of the engine, and by using things like control rig, you can actually have full control over setting up a facial rig. You can have full inverse kinematics in engine now, and none of those things were possible just a mere couple of years ago.
I love that. Yeah, like all the digital human stuff looks really amazing. And just to loop back around that, do you see there being, let's say, dedicated departments or environment artists that are like, what do you do for a living? I'm a virtual production, environment scene assembler or whatever, lighting artist.
Definitely. So the whole process of getting data into the engine model-wise is still pretty much the same. It hasn't changed. People are still going to be working in a DCC application, whether it's Maya, Max, Modo, Blender, or whatever. They're still going to have to build things, and a lot of them are using ZBrush and stuff for characters. So that's still fairly the same. So there are, however, and you start to see now in Unreal some new geometry-based tools in Unreal, besides the fact that you can do some landscapes, and now we have these new volumetric sky tools and water tools that you can do to create some really sophisticated looking landscapes with foliage and the whole works. But now, we're even getting some ability to, do regular full, traditional style modeling, extruding things, lathing things, all that kind of capability is now starting to show up in the engine as well. So do I think that we'll be doing a ton of modeling in the engine? Not as much as one would, expect. I still think the DCC applications have a big lead on, really cool modeling tools. And, we just want to be able to make sure that we can manipulate them, modify them if we have to in engine, make some tweaks and changes here and there. But the need for a full-fledged modeling package inside of the engine, I don't know. I'll let Kim Labiri decide if that's something that he wants, to have done. But I don't know. I see the advantage of it, but you don't want to go off the deep end too much.
Yeah, I mostly mean like, let's say working on set, you're at a soundstage and you need operators as well as assets coming in, but let's say a full photoreal environment that's obviously optimized to work in Unreal, having people building all the assets ahead of time, rather than it being like you're in previz. Obviously, visual effects is its own budget. So when you're working in movies, you're going to need to assemble a team that's kind of borrowing from the pre-production budget to build a lot of these assets, and also set up environments. That way you have a photorealistic environment behind you of sand dunes or whatever it might be, that you can't just pull a VFX artist off the street and sit him in front of Unreal and say, start operating. So yeah, I was just kind of curious whether there might be new departments kind of being built specifically for working on set or building assets to work in film production.
Right. Well, let's just look at Quixel.
Mm-hmm. Those guys.
Yeah. It's like Epic acquired Quixel, and all of a sudden we had an entire library of photorealistic scanned geometry of environments and pieces of environments that artists could basically say, I need, put something in, look for it, find it, bring it over from Quixel and put it into engine. And it's, photorealistic with full photogrammetry and nice high resolution scan. And it looks great. So, the Quixel team, they basically are still continuing their mission, scanning the world. So they go out regularly.
Climbing mountains.
Yeah, they go out and they scan everything. And Unreal Engine users get the benefit of this. Production designers, virtual art departments, they just have to go and, take a look inside the marketplace or launch, Quixel and search for what they're looking for, and potentially bring it in and kit bash something together that looks like they spent weeks on it. I think that's a huge time saver, especially in pre-production, when you're trying to rapidly prototype something that the director is happy with. Yeah, you want to be able to say, sure, let me get that for you, search for it, and have something up and functional that the director can look at in 15 minutes or less, is, or just he's sitting there next to you and, you can just do it with him watching, and it's great. Now, that doesn't mean that we're trying to put modelers out of work. It just means that, this is an asset. It's a tool that you can use for rapid prototyping, rapid visualization, and so forth. We still have to have, modelers to build custom things. And now those modelers can concentrate on those custom things, as opposed to modeling the small stuff that, would just chew up a lot of their time. They can just, you've got a creature that you need, designed and modeled. Okay, we'll put a character modeler on it. Oh, you have a complete unique set that you want to have designed. Sure, you put a modeler on it. But if you're looking for, routine everyday things and, stuff that can be done quickly, yeah, using the marketplace, using Quixel, fantastic tool.
Absolutely. And I'd love to talk about the fellowship because I think it's so exciting that you guys have this for a start, especially given the timing and everything as well. Just because, again, like I feel like there are so many solutions that are coming out, here and there, but they're not really nurtured the same way that you guys are creating opportunity for everyone. So do you mind discussing a bit about what the fellowship is, and we can kind of dig in from there?
Right, sure. Well, of course, COVID-19, boom, it hits, and suddenly lots of people are out of work. They're being furloughed. They're in lockdown or quarantine. And, Epic basically, Tim Sweeney basically put down the decree. This is an opportune time to start giving people a chance to learn the engine. So in combination with, an act of charity and altruism and that kind of thing, there's a lot of people who are out of work. Epic, we can help. So it was, let's create a program in which we pay people to learn Unreal. Now, granted, of course, it's an opportunity for us. It helps us, seed the marketplace with people who are knowledgeable about Unreal. And every fellowship graduate is kind of an ambassador that kind of goes out into the world. And so it's a win-win, individuals get an opportunity to be paid to learn, and they learn new skills, and, it helps soften the blow from, the whole, furlough thing. So it caught on, and it caught on, pretty well. And we've done 3 cohorts now, and our 4th starts March 1st, a couple weeks from now. And, we're still doing the same program. We're paying people, to continue learning Unreal. And, is this something that will go on forever? Unlikely, but, for the immediate time, it is something that we've budgeted for, and that, we want to provide individuals access to this kind of program. It's like a scholarship or grant, basically.
That's great. And what kind of artists typically do you seek out? Because I'm assuming that it isn't just come off the street. You heard of 3D, that's good enough. Like, obviously there's a huge demand. So I imagine that there's a kind of specific type of person you're looking for, but also in general, like, who ideally takes advantage of this sort of thing.
Right. We did set up a rubric for, how we wanted to choose and select people. Obviously we were hoping and giving preference to those who were furloughed or unemployed. And that has started to change now. We're starting to see, some modifications to, people's work conditions and situations and so forth. But our rubric basically says, hey, we'd like you to have 5 years of production experience. We would prefer that you have about 3 to 5 film credits on your IMDb page. Or if you work in broadcast, you've got a couple of episodic programs that you've worked on, some series and some shows. And if you're a game artist, we'd like you to have 2 or 3 AAA titles under your belt. So we weren't taking complete novices, but a lot of the people who are coming in, we wanted them to be, at some point or at some level, a professional who was looking to be retrained in using real-time technology. So I would say out of our cohorts, approximately 60-65% of them usually came from a visual effects or animation production background. But we also opened it up to people who were stage operations people, film production, folks, creatives, directors, cinematographers, visual effects supervisors, of course. But we had a couple producers in there as well, some photographers, even some, some grips and gaffers and, folks that were, working on the stage. Because, when you're working in virtual production and you're dealing with the whole LED wall kind of thing, these people who work on the stage are also curious about how this all operates. So we were like, yeah, we're interested in you too. Let's get you trained. And so we did not, however, at least for the current cohorts that we've held so far, we did not accept folks that were outside of media and entertainment. No architecture, no automotive, no manufacturing, no simulations, that kind of thing. We decided to wait. And it is fully our intention to eventually hold fellowships for those market verticals too. But we're using media and entertainment as kind of like our test bench.
Industry at a time.
Yeah.
That's good. And what type of roles like typically open up? Obviously, like there are only so many sound stages that have, like Mel's is a good example. I chatted with them recently over in Montreal. They have the biggest virtual production soundstage in Canada, but I believe, or at least in Quebec. But in general, like what type of roles typically are people able to walk out and start kind of pursuing after going through the training?
Well, the fellowship, we kind of see it in phases. What the current cohorts are going through is what we refer to as a phase 1 fellowship. It focuses primarily on fundamentals. It focuses on, buttonology. What does this button do? What does this button do? It focuses on linear content creation, animation creation, and just general operations of using the engine. But it's all put into the context of virtual production. So we have a series of guest speakers who come in, who are working in virtual production, who speak to the fellows, and they start basically, priming the pump of their imaginations of what can be possible with this technology. Obviously, when you're stuck at home and you're in lockdown and all you have is your laptop or your computer, it's difficult to say, prescribe a specific tech stack to all these people and say you must have this camera and this graphics card and this, etc. And it makes it really difficult, to do a really technical hands-on fellowship in quarantine. So, we said, hey, if you have a computer, if you have a workstation with a really, a reasonably current graphics card, you'll be able to do this program. We didn't want to, make it, have a barrier to entry because of the technology. And if there were people, and there were, who did not have a good workstation, we actually provided them with virtual machines running on the cloud. And, we would have them download, Teradici software, and they would log into a virtual workstation that would be, equipped with 64 gigs of RAM and, a really nice GPU spec machine. And as long as they had a decent broadband connection, they'd get probably about 95% performance out of the virtual machine as they would with one that would be under their desk. So, and we've had a lot of people that, took advantage of that. And actually a lot of fellows would actually request for a virtual machine in addition to having their own local machine.
Yeah, almost, despite the computers I got in this room, which are minimum 128 gigs of RAM and pretty beastie, but I'd almost want to use your machines over a regular machine any day.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of folks that all they had were basically maybe a MacBook Pro or even just a regular MacBook Air. That's all they had. So, they did have a larger screen monitor, which was good. They plugged that in and then they log into the virtual machine and they would just run Unreal on Windows on their Mac via the cloud, so it worked pretty well.
That's great. And how's the course structured? I'm kind of curious, like how much training is, like how many hours, but also just how typically have you structured the training too?
Right. Well, we ask that everybody is willing to commit 6 weeks of time. Our first program was a full 6 weeks fellowship. We didn't have a prep week. We just kind of threw them into it. And for the first cohort, which was 15 people, we actually had a higher bar. We wanted 10 years of production experience, but these are the folks that were kind of testing things out as a pilot. Mm-hmm. Where was I? I lost my train of thought.
Sorry. Just talking about the structure of the course and
okay, correct. Thank you. So what we moved to eventually in cohort 2, we actually cut it back from 6 weeks to 4 weeks, and had them basically working an 8-hour day, 5 days a week. The 4 weeks turned out to be a little too fast. So we settled on 5 weeks with a 1 week, what we call, week 0 or prep week. So we have them come in during week 0. They go through a lot of orientation and kind of some preliminary courses that we have on our online learning portal. And, we basically kind of orient them to how the program's going to operate. And we get them into Slack, and, they meet their mentors, and, they get ready to start the following week. And then weeks 1 through 5 is where they basically hit it. And, a typical day would start out with, we would hold coffee hour in the morning. We were, and we still do, have lots of people around the world taking this program. So it wasn't just people in LA or just in Pacific time. We had folks in the UK, we have folks in India. This next cohort that's coming up, we've got a lot of folks from Australia. So, we would want to use the coffee hour in the morning as a way for everybody to kind of gather, in the morning for us in the US, or, in late in the afternoon for people overseas. And so they would go to coffee hour, and then after that, they would move into a 2-hour block of instruction or a class. And the way we're scheduling it for this cohort, they do a 2-hour block starting at 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning, Pacific time. And then they'll immediately go into a 1-hour instructor's lab, which will basically allow them to ask a lot of specific questions, Q&A to the instructor. We tried in earlier cohorts a lot to let them ask questions during the presentation, and it just was too chaotic, especially when you're dealing with 100 people, So this particular cohort, this term, it's going to be, you're going to get your 2-hour block of instruction straight up. Please hold your questions till the very end. When we get into the instructor's lab, they'll get into the instructor lab, and then they'll just kind of dive into all the Q&A. Mm-hmm. So they would do this every day. Some days we would have classes in the afternoon as well, depending upon what would be scheduled. But we also made sure that we had we had scrums or weeklies and dailies, kind of. The scrums was the small group dynamic that mentors could either do in one block of time, or they could spread them out through smaller chunks of time every day. We just kind of left that up to the teams to decide how they wanted to do that. And, we would also have guest speakers in the afternoon, special projects talk. Our whole special projects team would sometimes come in and give, some specific demonstrations and classes and so forth. And then, of course, we'd end the day typically, with a happy hour every day. Mm-hmm. And then on Fridays, we'd do weeklies where we do large group review, and each mentor would recommend 2 or 3 people from their team to present in weeklies to the entire student body. And that was really helpful and inspirational for folks because they could see what other people were working on outside of their teams and, hear feedback, because all of the mentors would chime in and talk about, what they're seeing and have you considered this, your shot could use this or that. And, so we give them, critique and feedback. in addition to what we were giving them in their scrums. So, and we also set up times for our technical artists team to also hold labs. So twice a week, we would hold 3-hour blocks of time for them to go in and ask anybody from Epic questions about how to do things. And the mentors would be in these, and the TAs would be in these. And they could ask anything that was either based off of the instruction they had, or, hey, I'm working on my project and I can't get this or this or this to work. Can you walk me through it? So that becomes the big secret sauce, so to speak, of what makes the fellowship really kind of popular and helpful, is because you're going through this entire educational program with somebody holding your hand. It's like you have a mentor assigned to you that's like, I'm going to help you and keep you from going off the rails. And we're going to get a short film done, because when you're done with this, we want you to be able to say, I made this in Unreal in 5 weeks. And, we've gotten some examples of short films that have come out that have just blown me away. They're just amazing. And it's a combination of their skill sets, plus the mentorship and, the community all working together to, and it's amazing what they produce.
That's so cool. And I'm just curious, like, let's say with March 1st intake, how many people typically are you looking to bring in, like accept into the fellowship?
One more time?
In terms of like student intake, like what's the head count that you're typically looking for?
Each cohort is 100 people.
100.
So that is what we found as being probably our max threshold. If you start doing more than 100 people, it starts to become too chaotic. And we want to try to keep the mentor to fellow ratio reasonable. Mm-hmm. So this term, we're doing it a little bit differently this term. There will be a mentor to fellow ratio of 20 fellows to 1 mentor. But that mentor will have 2 assigned technical artists to them, and what we're calling a subject matter expert from Epic. So they will come in and rotate amongst the teams every week, so that there might be a subject matter expert for rigging or for modeling or for textures or whatever, and they'll just rotate between the teams so that they will get access to these Epic personnel who are highly trained and highly skilled, and work with Unreal in production every day, and and that's what you just can't get enough of. It's like,
yeah, I think that's such a brilliant structure, because if you think of, let's say, Sony or ILM as two examples that you've worked at, you would have in the beginning potentially a mentor assigned, as well as you'd go through your 1 week of training and get kind of indoctrinated into Xeno and whatever other tools that they throw at you. Gotta hate Xeno. And I think in a lot of ways, like, it's great to have that structure, but at the same time, like what you're explaining too, like that's taking it to a whole new level, where it's kind of setting people up where you can't fail. You're equipped with the right resources, knowledge, and everything you need to really be able to come out the other end, embracing your skills and applying it to the technology and the programs and everything else that you're utilizing. So I think that's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, and I think this coming term is going to be really interesting, because now they're going to have access to the metahumans. Mm-hmm. And now, granted, we only have 2 metahumans that are out right now for samples, but I was just kind of amazed what they did with Echo, which was the female character that we had in the past 3 cohorts. She was based off of the character that's going to be released with Unreal Engine 5, and she's kind of more stylized and looks more CG-ish, so to speak, where the metahumans, of course, are closer to photorealism. I'm really interested to see what the fellows do with the metahumans, because I think that's going to really, especially because it's just basically a couple of clicks and grab your iPhone and you can start to, put in a whole facial capture performance into the mix. And that's going to be nice.
I was just chatting with Doug Roble, keep saying Roble, Doug Roble, who's the oldest employee at Digital Domain, who's heading up their digital humans, so all the deep learning and everything they're doing there. And to me, it kind of fascinated me looking at like his predictions for where technology is going, where 5 years from now, the way that we'll animate will be completely different to how regular character animators animate now. And I was joking that, you're going to replace having a mirror next to your desk as you're looking at your phonemes and facial expressions, and that's going to become a webcam because you're actually doing exactly what you just said, like putting your performance into your phone. So, amazing.
Yeah, it'll finally give animators a chance, to be, animators are already inserting their performance into all these different characters. But, by using an iPhone and the ability to do facial capture, they'll actually be able to put their actual acting into, a character itself. We could go down the whole rabbit hole about, keyframe animation versus mocap, but the fact of the matter is that a performance is a performance. Whether you're keyframing that performance or you're actually acting that performance, it's still your performance. So I think some animators will probably adopt the technology with open arms. Others might be like, no, I want to stick with keyframing, and that's totally fine. They can keyframe in control rig.
There you go. You're absolutely right. It's basically looking at creature animation, so dinosaurs and other more photoreal creatures versus, let's say, Pixar or more stylized animation. So, there's always going to be two extremes.
Okay, well, as the slide suggests, who is Epic Games? Obviously, we've got the whole thing that we can read here, but I will forward through to the question that you had, which was basically, there we go. Okay, so you asked the question regarding what kind of clients have we worked with, or what type of projects have we worked on. This is just a sampling of some of the projects that Unreal Engine has been used for in production, whether all kinds of different capacities, whether ranging from pre-visualization, even into some cases final pixel. But these are projects that have been using Unreal since, back to 2016. And I can, maybe give you a little bit of insight if you have one in particular, but some of the 2020 projects that, we could probably speak about, or that has been done. Let's see here. I've got a list here. Call of the Wild. We've got some Midnight Sky, there's Jingle Jangle, Over the Moon, Star Trek Discovery. There's a few more here too. His Dark Materials, Westworld. There's a couple that have been, that we could say are specifically 2020. And all of these are, like I said, they're using Unreal Engine in different capacities, and so in some cases, there was a project that the Henson Company did. It was called Earth to Ned. I don't know if you caught that. It was kind of like obviously Ned was an alien, a big animatronic character. And it was a talk show host kind of scenario in which they used a virtual character in the background. So this virtual character was one of the co-stars with the main animatronic character, and they were basically driving it live via Henson's puppeteering capabilities while they filmed. That was pretty interesting usage of the engine. All the previz houses right now are using Unreal. whether it's the third floor, Halon, Proof. They're all using Unreal Engine for an array of different projects in a previz capacity. We have a couple that are doing things for in-camera visual effects, a few things for doing some CG backgrounds and matte paintings and that kind of thing. And then some that are using it in their virtual art departments for doing VR scouting and forms of set scouting in the engine as well. So there's quite an array.
Love that. I guess with the walk, I'm just picking one at random, but that would have been Kevin Bailey's team. Was that more for the experience that they created, do you know, or was it for production as well?
Are you referring to Welcome to Marwin?
Well, that's Kevin too, but the walk specifically, which was Man on Wire, sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't have
down the bottom left. No, I was just curious, really, because I know that they simulated walking, doing the movie's another. I was going to say Emmerich, Zemeckis film that just like Marwin, but it's about
down here
tightrope walking from the Twin Towers from one side to the other. But because I noticed that they actually created a VR experience for that, so I was just curious whether that was tied into that. But this is more because I just saw it down the bottom left.
Unfortunately, I can't chime in on that one. I don't know.
No worries. But I think it's amazing. I mean, again, just seeing not only knowing there's such a huge array of productions having been using it, but also looking at how dated some of these are. Like looking at how some people are innovating early on, and looking at the potential so early on as to how to leverage this. But again, I also think with virtual production being such a big buzzword right now, Mandalorian kind of opening up the doors too. I imagine a lot of people are going to really kind of jump on this. I've been talking with a lot of feature film directors who've all been looking at should I finance my own, virtual production stage, knowing it's $8 to $12 million depending on where and how much money they want to put into it. But yeah, I think it's just so exciting to kind of see where this is all going. I'm curious for you, what technology do you see coming down the pipe that you're really excited for, that you can mention without obviously giving away anything, knowing that you've got the inside scoop on a lot of things, so it's a bit more of a sensitive topic than most people?
Well, I was definitely all keyed up, with the whole metahumans thing, because with cubic motion and 3-lateral as part of our family now, there's a lot of technology there in the sense of being able to create near photorealistic humans. Obviously, there's still some examples that are better than others that we've produced that help to achieve more of that photorealism, and that overcoming the uncanny valley. I'm pretty much under the impression that all this is going to continue to improve, and the case for virtual humans is going to continue to grow. So that was a major thing that I've been waiting on, and the whole MetaHuman creator is going to be a big thing. It's a web-based, cloud-based interface where you'll be able to pretty much sculpt and create whatever it is that you want character-wise, and you'll be able to bring those characters into your Unreal Engine projects seamlessly. So that was a huge one for me, and the reason why that one's such a big one for me is because I'm thinking back in my previz days, where it was like, great, we need a character, and we need a character fast, and it needs to look like so and so or such and such. And now that's not going to be an issue anymore, and you can potentially dial in a human in a matter of a couple of hours, and have it ready and inside of your project fully rigged. Granted, there's going to be some time there of how long it's going to take the cloud system to process your request and get it all fully rigged and prepped, and then you have to download it and so forth. So it's still not like instant, results, but your feedback of being able to work and shape and manipulate and sculpt that character it will be a much more interactive experience. And then once you get the data downloaded and bring it into Engine, of course, it'll be performant. So, and there's all different levels of detail that come with those metahuman models. So you've got all the way up to, full resolution with groomed hair, the whole works, and you get the highest level quality that you can, or you can dial back those settings and change your levels of detail so that you have better performance based off of whatever platform you're going to publish to. So that's good. As far as other technologies, control rig is another biggie that I think is going to change the way we think about using game engines. And control rig is a whole infrastructure of technology that not only gives you the chance to potentially create an IK rig of some character in the engine, but it can also be influenced by all the other subsystems inside the engine as well, such as physics. So you could potentially have a character that's rigged with control rig where physics are acting on specific controllers, but you still have the ability to keyframe, and you still can combine IK with physics and get a result that, if you were trying to hand animate, would be very laborious, time consuming, and complicated. So now being able to combine these technologies, you're going to be able to produce animation that I think will be much more startling, that people won't, be expecting right away. I think it'll be impressive.
I'm curious too, I guess this would be one of my final questions, but in terms of how open-ended Unreal is, knowing, like, as you talk about, let's say, simulations, things like that, like looking at people being able to eventually, knowing that, like, let's say with CUDA, a lot of people have moved more to GPU for, let's say, ILM with a lot of their fluid simulation work, or even Embergen being one that's another gaseous-based, fluid sim. But for any more kind of complex solvers, whether it's cloth or hair or I realize a lot of this stuff, including plantation, things like that, are already in there. But do you see there being perhaps support for being able to develop custom solutions for simulating and doing things to implement directly into the engine?
I would say that that's certainly a possibility. I would also probably say that simulations isn't an area of my expertise, but if we were to take a look at announced technologies that are coming, still, there's Nanite, there's Lumen. These are two technologies that are going to be brought into Unreal Engine 5, which of course you're dealing with increased resolution of various meshes that are brought into the engine, and then of course moving all of your GI over onto the GPU so that you can have real-time GI. These two things alone are going to really change a lot of people's usage of the engine. Production designers are going to go crazy. It's like they're going to be able to construct sets and environments that were unthinkable before, especially with the level of detail that you'll be able to get with Nanite. And then of course, we are still in the process of the integration of chaos. So you're going to have all interesting ways of being able to use chaos to drive cloth simulations and so forth. So I would say those have got to be the biggest technology improvements that are on the horizon that I think people will, really get a kick out of.
I love it. And I said it'll probably be my last question, but I lied.
Okay.
One thing I just know a lot of people would find benefit in, and you kind of already hinted at it a little bit, but what would be some ideal specs for, let's say, someone who is a pretty dedicated, I'll say, like, rather than being an enthusiast, like someone who's wanting to start creating heavy environments and doing a lot with Unreal Engine, like what would be some ideal specs, whether it is like a more favorable card? Obviously, NVIDIA is kind of dominating the world now, but in terms of, RAM, CPU, whatever else.
Sure. A classic configuration for a lot of our artists that are at Epic is typically 96 gigabytes of RAM, I think, is like the base. SSD drives, NVMe drives. A 2080 Ti is probably, now the base as far as, a GPU. But, if you have access to a 3080 or a 3090, you're going to be sitting pretty. Obviously, if you're going to be doing more professional work, especially if you want to integrate end display, you're going to need to pick yourself up a Quadro card, an RTX Quadro card, because you need to have the ability to synchronize your displays. And the only way that you can do that is with a Quadro card. You can't do it with the GeForce cards. So if you're going to be using end display to drive your LED wall, you'll have to buy Quadro based cards and the sync card that goes along with it.
No SLI these days.
Yeah. And as far as an i7, i9 Xenon processor, Threadripper, all of them are great choices. A lot of folks are going with Threadrippers nowadays, and for good reason. Great processor. And then there's some other pieces of technology that you'll have to consider if you want to do mocap, if you want to do virtual cameras or whatever. Need to get yourself an iPhone if you want to do facial capture, get yourself an iPad if you want to do virtual camera. With our, we've completely revamped our VCam, by the way. And that's a good, exciting, technology too, that's coming out. The VCam has been improved, and we now have VCam Core so that you can customize your virtual camera. And it's got a lot of extra capabilities that the first version of our VCam does not or did not have. So get yourself an iPad, a nice wireless router, and you can start doing virtual camera. We have, you'll probably still want to pick up some Vive controllers, some base stations, and some Vive pucks if you want to do some camera tracking. Mm-hmm. We've got a new plugin that will help make that process easier. And if you're going to do mocap, there's all kinds of solutions there. If you want to get yourself an XN suit, throw one of those on. You can stream directly into Engine. That's pretty nice.
It's pretty amazing, all the technology options we have these days that used to be such a luxury back in the day, like Vicon and everything else. I wasn't going to go there, but because you brought up the VCam, do you think having, let's say, iPhone 12 now has LiDAR support, primitive LiDAR support, do you think that that's going to play a role in the future with doing camera, like real-time camera tracking and virtual cameras?
I wouldn't doubt it. I can't give you any specific example yet as to how that'll be deployed within Epic, but I'm sure that all of our developers are looking into it. I could maybe theorize what might happen using that kind of tech, but right now, I would say most of the focus with using the iPhones as of late has been, with facial capture technology.
It's pretty interesting just because I wish I had known that Apple was going to drop something like that like 2 years ago, because I dropped 20, 30 grand on a LiDAR scanner just purely because otherwise, like if it's image based, you're interpreting perspective and trying to guess what's going on. But with LiDAR, like lasers, you're actually able to have a hard surface that then it's more about just snapping a camera into 3D world. So it's able to interpret it extremely quick compared to, let's say, just doing a camera solve without any actual geometry to work from. Usually you end up with multiple cameras, and still it's a lot of guesswork rather than having a physical model of the environment that is then saying, okay, just tell me where that is in the footage, and everything just kind of snaps into place in minutes rather than hours to track or days to track, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say, the first point of application will probably be, using the LiDAR on your iPhone so that you can quickly walk into a set, do a quick scan, and have something available for, pre-visualization purposes really quickly. So, break out your iPhone, just, scan your environment, and, either export that point cloud directly into Engine so that you can use it to pre-visualize against. I would see that happening without a doubt. It's probably happening already, to some degree. But I know that there's a lot of workflows, where places will go and use LiDAR camera or LiDAR type devices, like I think, what is it, the BLK.
The BLK 360.
Yep, the BLK 360. A lot of people are using those to basically place them in environments and scan their environment quickly so that they have the set captured. Yep. That's already being done clearly. Now you'll be able to hopefully do it, in your hand.
It's funny. I was talking with Leica, who develops the BLK, a few months ago, and they had no idea that it was being used in the film industry. They thought it was just purely for more industrial type stuff. So they become pretty fascinated with the fact that games and film are actually wanting to do all that.
Well, I can't even say it now. Set preservation, there we go, is a big thing. You go out and you capture the set, you shoot on the set, and if you need to make changes or modifications later, hey, you've captured it, you've got a scan of it, and if necessary, you can rebuild it if you absolutely have to, and capture those pickups that you need that you might have failed to capture on the day.
Absolutely. Now, this has been amazing. I appreciate you taking the time. Where can people go to find out more about Unreal? What is that small thing? Obviously, it's not too hard to find these things, but I guess the main thing I'm sure everyone is dying to know is how they can apply for the fellowship, especially the Mosh one. But like where they can go to find out more, but also how they can apply for it as well.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the March class is full. But if you go to unrealengine.com and you go down to education and online learning, you can get started there. So, and then there's also a web page for the fellowship as well. So let's see, Unreal Engine Fellowship. So if we go down to, there it is. Let me see if I can just bring this up really quick. There we go. unrealengine.com/en-us/fellowship. You can get a basic understanding of what the fellowship is, read through of what we're starting to offer, and then down at the bottom you can fill out your name and your email address, etc., for your to express your interest. And there will likely be another open application coming soon. Our first application out to the world generated over 6,000 applicants. So we've been a little swamped combing through those. And we pulled our second and third cohort, and now our fourth cohort from people who applied during that process. But this has now been several months of this. So people's situations and circumstances are changing. So that means we're going to have to probably reopen the application process to refresh everything and get more current applications. When that will happen, not sure. But if you fill out that form on the webpage that I showed you, you'll be alerted when it happens.
That's great. And do you have any indication, and I won't hold you to it, but when the fourth one might be opening, whether it's June or?
Well, the fourth one starts in March. So that's March 1st. So right. The fifth one, let me tell you here real quick. These are just approximations. I can't guarantee you that these are locked in dates. But I will tell you right now that class 5 is looking to start around the 10th of May.
Great.
And then, class, the summer fellowship is probably going to be, late July. And then the fall fellowship will be in October, and it'll wrap usually before Thanksgiving. When we open up that application process again, not exactly sure. I'd have to ask, and talk with Linda Selheim, who's kind of the administrative lead of the fellowship. She's my boss, and she's the one, between her and I, we created this program, and she's handling basically all the logistics and all of the administration aspect of things, and I'm kind of handling stuff on the academic and curriculum side of things. So it'll be her decision as to when the doors get reopened for taking applications. Got it.
Well, again, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this is amazing, and I think that the fellowship itself is a brilliant idea, and I think that having something like that is really what a lot of people, I think, are going to need, because, again, I do think that this is one of those things that will be the future, and actually having, going to the source of it all and actually getting to learn the right way rather than fragmenting bits and pieces together 6 months, 12 months from now. I think it's amazing that you guys have put this together.
Thank you. We really appreciate that.
Okay, what do you think? Thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot from this. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you like this subject and you want me to go deep on it with other content as well, feel free to leave even a simple yes to let me know, and I'll definitely follow up with as much content, as much value I can give to you as possible. I also mentioned this earlier, but right now I just released a free course on how to raise your prices as an artist, how to attract your dream clients, as well as how to do your side hustle. I've been in the industry for 25 plus years, both as an artist, as well as a manager, hiring artists and managing them, paying them, so I'm very familiar with this topic. And for me, it's a pet peeve that artists use the excuse that there's no money in art, or art doesn't pay, art's not a real career. I want to eliminate the starving artist mindset for good. So that's why I want to share with you 8 hours of training, everything I know about how to price yourself and raise your rates and get what you deserve, as well as building your side hustle as well as an artist. So that way you can leverage your talents to be able to sell assets, be able to do NFTs, everything else in between. So lots to dive into. Check it out, pricingclass.com, or click the link below the video. You can check it out there. Thanks again for watching. So that's it from me. By the way, it would mean the world to me if you could like and subscribe to this channel, as well as share this video, because I would love to keep making more content for you. I appreciate you, and I look forward to continuing to serve you on your journey to success as an artist. I'm Allan McKay, and thanks for watching. Oh, before I go, I also posted an interview with the founder of Megascans, Teddy Bergsman, discussing the acquisition of Megascans through Epic Games, as well as talking about Unreal Engine, Megascans in general, photogrammetry, digital environments, the future of real-time, and so much more. So click the link below to check it out. Again, thanks for watching.